We all watch the news. We all watch social media. We all flip through articles and read about true crime. We know this world is a particularly brutal place. For some reason, we still have the misunderstanding that this cannot happen to us. On this day, my family understood every bit of what that pain felt like.
On Mother's Day, about 32 years ago, our telephone started ringing, and I tried to ignore it. My husband was at work across town. Nobody would be calling me that early in the morning. The phone continued to ring, so my small daughter, who was about 5 at the time, answered the phone. In a minute, she came to me and said, "Mommy, the corner office is calling." Well, it was indeed the corner office telling me the chilling news that my brother was dead.
Never could we have imagined that 23 other families would be feeling this exact same pain as you've just heard. My uncle's is not a confirmed death, but he was the last one seen with him on that fateful day. You see, the man in question that would light fire to the local media was Rafael Resendez Ramirez. He was believed to have been part of 23 murders, but is only officially tied to 9. Angel Matarrina Resendez was one of the most elusive and dangerous serial killers in American history. Known as the Railroad Killer, Resendez used the vast railway system of North America to travel undetected, leaving a trail of brutal murders across multiple states. His crimes were marked by extreme violence, often bludgeoning his victims to death, and his ability to evade law enforcement for years made him one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. His early life was one of a violent and nomadic beginning. Resendez was born on August 1st, 1959, in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico, just across the border from Texas. His early life was chaotic and marked by violence. Raised in an impoverished and unstable environment, Resendez was shuffled between different family members throughout his childhood. His mother, Virginia Resendez de la Matarreno, later stated that he had a difficult upbringing but refused to believe he was capable of the horrific crimes attributed to him. As a child, Resendez exhibited antisocial tendencies and a disregard for authority. Reports suggest that he was physically abused and neglected, which may have contributed to his later violent behavior, as it often does. By his teenage years, he was already engaging in criminal activities, including petty theft and illegal border crossings into the United States. The border between Mexico and Texas was notoriously porous at the time, and Resendez took full advantage of it. At a young age, he learned how to survive on the streets. He drifted between cities, stealing to support himself and developing skills that would later allow him to live off the grid while committing his murders. His early brushes with the law involved burglary and auto theft, but as he continued to cross the US Mexico border illegally, his criminal activities escalated. His early criminal activities and illegal immigration. Resendez spent his late teens and early 20s as a transient, frequently being detained and deported for illegally entering the U.S. His extensive knowledge of train systems and railway yards began during this time. He would hop onto freight trains traveling across different states undetected. This would later become his signature method of moving between crime scenes, allowing him to evade capture for years. During the 1970s and 1980s, Resendez was arrested multiple times under different aliases for theft, weapons, possession, and fraud. His use of false identities made it difficult for authorities to track his movements. He would serve short jail sentences, then quickly return to his transient lifestyle. The U.S. immigration system at the time lacked the sophisticated tracking methods, and Resendez exploited these weaknesses to remain a phantom in the system. At some point in the 1980s, he spent time in Florida and Missouri, committing burglaries and possibly other violent crimes that were never officially linked to him. He showed signs of increasing aggression, and as his criminal behavior escalated, psychological state deteriorated. By the mid 1990s, Resendez had evolved from a petty criminal to a ruthless killer. He began targeting victims along railway lines, breaking into homes near train tracks, and killing the occupants in gruesome, sadistic ways. His preferred method of murder was bludgeoning his victims to death using whatever was available: hammers, rocks, pickaxes, or even his bare hands. His victims were often middle class educated individuals who lived near train tracks, making them easy targets for his transient lifestyle. Unlike many serial killers, Resendez did not seem to have a specific victim profile. His victims included men, women, the elderly, and even children. However, he did intend to target people in isolated homes where he could kill without interruption. His first known murder in the U.S. occurred in 1997, though investigators suspect he may have killed much earlier. Over the next 2 years, his killing spree intensified, spanning multiple states including Texas, Kentucky, Illinois, Georgia, and Florida. Here are some of his notable murders. December 1997, Christopher Meyer from Lexington, Kentucky. A University of Kentucky student, Christopher Meyer, was walking with his girlfriend along some railroad tracks when Resendez attacked them. He bludgeoned Meyer to death and brutally assaulted his girlfriend, who miraculously survived. May 2, 1999, Norman and Karen Cernick in Weimar, Texas. The couple was found bludgeoned to death in their home near railroad tracks. Resendez used a sledgehammer to kill them, then lingered in their home eating their food before stealing their valuables. June 4th, 1999, Noemi Dominguez in Houston, Texas, was a school teacher. Dominguez was killed in her home again by blunt force trauma. Resendez then drove her car to another location where he committed another murder. June 4th, 1999, Josephine Convica of Fayette County, Texas. Hours after killing Dominguez, Resendez broke into the home of Josephine Convica, an elderly woman, and beat her to death. June 15th, 1999, George Morber and Caroline Friedrich, Gorham, Illinois. Morber was an 18-year-old man, was shot in the head while his daughter was brutally beaten to death with a weapon. His ability to move between states so quickly, along with the randomness of his victims, made tracking him a nightmare for law enforcement. However, investigators eventually realized that all of the killings had one thing in common. They were near railroad tracks. The FBI placed Resendez on its 10 most wanted fugitive list, offering a reward for information leading to his capture. The intense media attention and pressure from authorities ultimately led his family to convince him to surrender. On July 13th, 1999, Resendez's sister Manuela arranged for him to turn himself in at the international bridge connecting El Paso, Texas to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. He was taken into custody without incident. Once arrested, Resendez confessed to at least 23 murders, though authorities suspect the real number could be much higher. His confessions were chilling. He showed no remorse and even described his murders in vivid detail, explaining how he felt guided by God to kill those he deemed evil. His trial and execution. Resendez was charged with multiple counts of murder, with Texas prosecutors leading the case. Given the brutality of his crimes, the trial was relatively straightforward. He was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. Despite attempts by his defense attorneys to argue that he was mentally ill, the jury decided to reject the claim. Resendez often contradicted his legal team, asserting that he was not insane and that he knew exactly what he was doing. On June 27, 2006, at age 46, Angel Maturino Resendez was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final statement, he expressed regret for his crimes, but claimed that he was going to a better place. Resendez's reign of terror exposed flaws in the immigration system, law enforcement coordination, and how serial killers can remain undetected for years. His ability to move across the country without a fixed identity or home made him nearly impossible to track. Many of his victims' families remain haunted by his action, while investigators continue to believe that additional murders committed in the 1980s and the 1990s may be linked to him. To this day, the Railroad Killer remains one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, and a reminder of how lone drifters can leave devastation in his wake.